Hey, this is Annie with Artisan Annie's Wood Shop. Today I'm going to show you how I built this wooden stove cover. There are the steps involved, and then I do go through the plans and my measurements, so follow along. At the end of the video I will have a special clip if anybody can put in the comment section of what they are seeing, and you will know what my favorite hobby is. So let's get started. As you can see on the video, I am using a jointer with this. If you don't have it, I recommend not buying rough sawn lumber. I do like to have rough sawn lumber just because I can pick out what I like, what I want. It is a little less expensive, but if you don't have a joiner or a planer, that may be a little bit difficult. So I do get everything all squared up. Nice and smooth, nice and plain. I am using Purple Heart, Zebrawood, and Walnut in this build. This build is actually for my two best friends that just recently got married, and this will be their Christmas present. I am hopeful that they don't watch this video before Christmas, but I'm gonna go ahead and post it, and if they see it, then they know what they're getting. Oh well. Then I will move them over to the miter saw. I'll cut them all a little bit long at 30 inches, just so that way I know I have a comfortable length, that the final cut down will be all nice and square for the cutting board section part of this. Then off to the planer to get the third side nice and flat. When using Zebrawood, I actually go in the slow speed just to minimize tear out. That type of exotic wood does seem to tear out quite a bit, especially at the faster speed. I have upgraded to the helical head. I don't have the straight flat knives that comes with that planer. I really wish DeWalt would have put that as a option to upgrade to before they sent it to me. Then at the table saw, that'll be the final fourth flat side. I do set my fence at 1 1/8 just to make it a little bit thick, so that way when I plane everything down, my final thickness will be about 1 inch. I cut down all 3 types of wood, about 9 strips of each, so that way I have some wiggle room if I don't like the grain, or if there's a knot or some type of void, that way I have a little extra. I really do like the grippers from Micro Jig. In the product description down below I will have a link. This is an affiliate link, so if you do like the video and you'd like to help support me, I'd really appreciate that. Step 3, this is the glue up process. This is my favorite step. That way you can see the project kind of coming together. I use Titebond 3. I will take old Honey Dijon mustard bottles because they don't clog up as bad as the smaller bottles of the Titebonds. Glue the face grain side, then flip everything on end so that way you have the edge grain exposed. I do 2 separate glue ups, mainly because my lunchbox planer only cuts up to 13 inches. Making sure I use cawls so that way everything is nice and flat. Then I glue the 2 sections together, cut them down to my final length, which is 29 inches. I actually use my miter saw for this. Yes, I think people are gonna gouge me on this one, but I don't have a good enough table saw or a crosscut sled. So I actually set up a stop block. Everything's nice and square, so it actually makes a really good flat edge. Then I flip it over and then cut the other back side of it. Then take a 3/8 rabbiting bit to make the tongue. I do 3 sides. Obviously I'm not going to do the front. And I slowly walk it up so that way I minimize tear out. Step 5, I cut the sides and the back. I do make them a width of 4 inches. At the miter saw, I do cut them a little bit long so that way I have wiggle room and can cut them down once my cutting board section, I have the final dimensions of that. Don't get in a hurry. I always wait till the miter saw comes to a stop before I lift it up. Now to make the decorative edge, I actually cut out a piece of 1/4 inch plywood, made sure I sanded it very smooth, and then I took a pencil and just drew on there for the design. And off to the bandsaw, I just rough cut that out, kind of staying close to the line but just outside of it. I go nice and slow so that way I don't screw it up. I did forget to record the groove on one side of the walnut. So meaning the 2 sides and the back all got a groove cut in it. I just used the fence along my router table. Worked really easy. I matched it up to the tongue section of the cutting board side so that way everything's nice and flush. Then I'll take painter's tape and my template that I created and actually use CA glue to make sure that's nice and adhered to the actual walnut. Then back to the router table, and I use this awesome router bit that I ordered from Whiteside. I will put that in a link as well. I used to be one of those that thought that cheap router bits was the way to go until I started having so much problems with tear out, kickback. But once I got this router bit, yes, it was pretty pricey, but once I started using that, I realized that I probably should use a little bit nicer router bits just for my safety, but not only to make a good final product as well. That's the compression bit I'm using. It has a bearing on the top and the bottom, so that way I can always go with the grain to minimize kickback. This thing is a beast, especially with hardwoods. It definitely gives you a nice smooth edge, which really minimizes sanding on those surfaces. And I make sure they all match up and looks good. Pretty happy with that. I am very thankful that I have a 3D printer. It allows me to make handles and templates like this, so that way I can use a guide bearing on my plunge router and go full thickness. That way I don't have to use a flush trim bit at the router table. I'm a little bit too scared of the kickback. I've seen some guys and gals do this and they have great success. I, however, had a kickback incident that jarred my wrist and I won't do it again. I learned my lesson on that one. Some of you peeps might have a CNC, which would make short work with that. I, however, do not. My little tiny crappy one doesn't do anything and actually doesn't work anymore. So I pull off the template, remove the tape, do the second side the same fashion, and then I start sanding the handles with this spindle sander. It's actually really convenient, really good price that I got on Amazon. I will put that link on there as well. It makes doing circles, inside circles, a lot faster than doing it by hand, so I really am glad that I picked this piece up. Then I take a 1/4 inch round over bit for the inside and the outside part of the handles. I do completely sand this before glue up. I start at 80 grit. I water pop between all the grits and make sure everything is nice and smooth. For those of you who don't know what water popping is, I take a tiny little spray bottle and just mist the wood. Then I take a heat gun and dry it and then start with that different grit. So the reason behind it is the little hair-like fibers of wood will actually stand up when it comes in contact with moisture. So if you use cutting boards and things that will come in contact with water, the first time somebody uses it with water will get a realization that it wasn't sanded appropriately. So once I work my way from 80 grit to 120, 150, 180, 220, then I stop at 320. I'm actually one of those weirdos that doesn't mind the 5,000 hours of sanding. I find it kind of fun. I did forget to mention that when I am using exotic woods, I will actually clean them with acetone before my glue up, just because some of them have kind of a higher oil to them, and I want to make sure that glue has good contact with the fibers of the wood, so that way it doesn't break apart as the years come. When I am sanding, I actually do have hearing protection in. You probably can't see that. I call them my Shrek ears. It's actually ISO tunes. It's kind of a cool little piece. At first I thought it was a little trippy hearing the echoing sounds, but now that I've gotten used to it, I actually quite like them. And plus I can take phone calls and hear my music while I'm using it. Actually, pretty neat little piece of technology. You'll also see that sometimes I'm actually applying CA glue. If I do see a small void or something that water may be able to impermeate inside that, I'll seal it with CA glue. Also a good idea to wear a dust mask. Have an air filtration system in your wood shop. And there's my little heat gun I like to use to speed up the drying process a bit as I'm jamming along. Whoop whoop! You can see my cute little grooves that I made on the sides and the back. They're 3/8 inch deep, and then they match that tongue side. Also, don't forget to look in the description below. I do have several of the products and things I used on here as my affiliate links. Really helps out. I did triple check my measurements and then cut the back and the sides down to make sure they matched and were flush with everything. At this point, I am getting pretty excited. Everything's coming together really well, and there hasn't been any major screw-ups at this point. I hope my friends like this as much as I did building it. I've had several people ask me if I'd make them one as well, so I might try to kick out some of these before Christmas, but I don't know if I'll have the time. Before any glue up, always pre-clamp everything. Make sure it's all nice and flat and flush. And I left it clamped up overnight. Came back, did final sanding, put my brand on it, did round over edges on the sides and the front. Then finished it with Odie's oil. That's my favorite food safe finish. Seems to be very protective. Also, keep in mind that Purple Heart will pop more as it oxidizes. So after you get done sanding it, it looks kind of dull and bland. Don't fear. Well, Merry Christmas to my friends. I hope they like this. Hope they haven't seen this video yet. If you guys can explain what these two octopus are doing, I'm kind of curious what you think. Head to my channel and check out some other things that I've made. Hope you like it. See you soon in the future. Thanks again for watching.